Welcome to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor, a cutting-edge radio talk show featuring attorneys of law and sisters Reagan, Rachelle, and Renee Hatcher. The Hatcher sisters are the proud daughters of Richard Gordon Hatcher, who was the first black elected mayor of a major city in the United States. While these sisters are all attorneys, they each have their own unique perspective and ideas about current events and the future of our society. They are the Sisters of Law. Get ready to call in at 219-885-1371. And remember, the views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily the views of this station. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. Thank you for listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. Today's show is pre-recorded. No phone calls, please.
The police the same way. They put their club upside your head and then turn around and accuse you of attacking them. Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this. And it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves. They attack the victim. And then the criminal who attacked the victim accuses the victim of attacking him. This is American justice. This is American democracy. And those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Now, if I'm wrong, put me in jail. But if you can't prove that a democracy is not hypocrisy, then don't put your hands on me.
Good morning. Welcome to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. This is Reagan Hatcher, and we are brought in this morning by the wonderful words of Malcolm X back in the early 60s that sound like they could be just as relevant today as they were then. I am joined today by my sister Rachelle Hatcher. Our other sister Renee has traveled to Ferguson to protest with the young men and women of that area who are still protesting the death of Michael Brown. But we do have a fill-in today, and that fill-in is my father, Richard Hatcher. Good morning, guys. How are you all this morning?
Good morning, everyone.
So, it's so much to talk about today. Not only are we still talking about what happened with Michael Brown in Ferguson, but now we're talking about Eric Garner in New York City as well, and the decision came down this week regarding the indictment of that police officer, which was also a no-go. This officer, like the one in Ferguson, was able to come in and testify on his own behalf in front of the grand jury, just as Darren Wilson did in Ferguson. And also this week, I think we have 2 additional shootings of white police officers against young black men who were unarmed.
Yeah, it's really a shame that there was no indictment in the Eric Garner case. You know, I think a lot of people were more surprised by that one than they were by the Michael Brown one, simply because there was a video of what had occurred, and it was so atrocious.
Yeah.
But, you know, that just shows how much further we have to go in terms of progress.
Yeah, and it just seems to be getting more and more difficult for young black men out on the streets. As I said, this week we had 2 additional cases of 2 other young men. One was a young man who was chased into a building by a police officer. The police officer tackled him, said he thought he felt a weapon in his pocket, shot him twice, and then learned that it was a small pill bottle.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I do think the body cameras are so important. I know after Eric Garner's case, a lot of people are saying the cameras don't matter because, you know, in his case, still there's no indictment, but they are extremely important still because, you know, what would have been different in the Eric Garner case if there hadn't been a video, the officer would have been claiming self-defense, or he
Right.
would have said, Eric Gardner did this, or I thought he had a weapon, or, all those kinds of things, just like in the Michael Brown case where they're saying, well, there was conflicting witness testimony. I mean, if there is video footage, then at least they can't assert those things that, seem
that's
very
right.
untrue. So I think it's important for everybody to still be in support of body cameras. I'm really encouraged by the fact that so many police departments are already starting to implement that program into their departments, because I do think it'll make a huge difference. And, it's in the Eric Gardner case, it may have even been different if those officers were wearing the cameras themselves. The fact that somebody else was recording, the officer who was choking Eric Gardner, we don't know if he even knew it was being recorded while that was happening. And I think police will act differently if they know there's a camera that's on them that is catching every single thing that happens. So I do think they will make a difference. Obviously, it's not the only thing we need to be doing to fix this problem, but it is a great first step.
Well, Dad, we heard the words of Malcolm X as we were coming into the show this morning, and I don't know the exact date in which he said that, but I'm sure it was from the early '60s. I mean, what's your perspective, just coming from a time of civil rights and this same kind of thing happening, white officers killing black men unarmed, looks to be no threat, and yet they end up dead? How can you compare that back to the '60s?
Well, I think it's basically a repetition of what took place in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1960s, there were incidents involving the police and young black men, as a general rule, and as a consequence of those events, and then the subsequent trial, where in too many cases, there was a finding of no fault, that the officers had acted within their legal responsibility, and they were justified in taking the action that they took. And so as a consequence, people did go into the streets in the 1960s. They did engage in marches and demonstrations in protest of the fact that there was no justice. And so as you go along and you think about Rodney King, actually you can go back further and think about Emmett Till and what happened to Emmett Till. If you recall, when Emmett Till was so brutally murdered, there was a trial. The sheriff's deputies that killed him were in fact tried, but it was a farce because, of course, there were no blacks on the jury, and the finding was not guilty. Subsequently, those same officers were tried in federal court, or were charged with federal law legal violations, and they were found guilty, and at least two of them were sent to prison. So this is nothing new that is taking place today. I think what is new is that, number one, it's happening all over the country, not just in the South, whereas before it was in the South. But now it's happening all over the country. And we look at a New York City, which most people think of as the most progressive, liberal city in the country. And this is where this is taking place. So I think that is a little different. And then, as you just pointed out, it seems to be happening so frequently now, just over and over and over again. Despite all of the publicity surrounding Trayvon Martin, if you recall that case, then we subsequently have these cases coming, Eric Gardner and others experiencing the same kind of treatment from police. So I'm really pleased to see so many young people out marching and demonstrating and protesting because that's the only thing I think that will force a stop to these kinds of events.
Well, I think that's well said and well put, Dad. And we were just talking about the new incidents that have occurred since Trayvon Martin. There was another one in New York City. His name was Akai Gurley, and he was literally standing in a stairwell in a apartment complex with his girlfriend, and the police came in doing what they call a vertical check, I guess, where they go up and down the staircases of these apartment complexes. And this officer, it opened the door. He walked in with his gun drawn and his flashlight pulled. They weren't being called to the scene. There was no report of any crime occurring. But in this vertical check, he walks in with his gun drawn and his flashlight drawn. And as soon as he opens the door, Akai Gurley is standing there, and he shoots him point blank in the chest. And the police department is calling it an accidental shooting, but they have convened a grand jury for that as well. They are saying that it took them 6.5 minutes to call it in after the shooting took place. And during that time, this rookie police officer texted his representative at the police union while he lay dying. And apparently he didn't die instantly, but by the time the police were called and the ambulance was called, he had died. So it's like ever since Trayvon Martin, it seems like it's kind of open season. And do you think it's that way because there was no conviction in that case? And you think police feel more relaxed now when they do these things? I
think in Eric Gardner's case, if you recall, after Eric Gardner had said, I can't breathe 11 times, and the chokehold, the police continued the chokehold after he had said that 11 times, and when the police finally got off of him, and they left him laying there, and Eric Gardner had not expired yet, but they provided no medical assistance.
Right.
They just stood around and made calls, as you said, and that's a tragedy. Michael Brown lying out in the street 4.5 hours, his body lying out in the street 4.5 hours, and no effort was made when he was shot to render any medical assistance to him.
Right.
So that compounds the injustice that these events represent. And one of the things, and I'll just raise this question, I'm a little surprised that there has been no marches or demonstrations in Gary. Why do you think it's happening in every other city in the country? Why do you think in this area, not just Gary, in this area, so-called Northwest Indiana area, why do you think there's been no marches or demonstrations here?
Well, Rachel, did you hear Rudy Giuliani and what he said about Gary?
I didn't hear what he said about Gary. I heard the back and forth between him and Michael Eric Dyson. But I just want to make a point about what Dad said. You know, I think that's what's most disturbing about this entire situation is the indifference that the police seem to have to human life. And, you know, when they're coming in, like the case you just talked about, their gun is already drawn, even though they have no reason to think there's a reason to fear for their safety. And they just open fire, you know, just like in the Tamir Rice case, the officer pulls all the way up to him and just shoots him. I mean, they have such indifference, and I don't know how they got so far away from protecting and serving, because they are just so far from that. And, you know, one of the things people in the military say is that they're trained to never raise their weapon unless that you intend to use it.
Yeah.
And they say that officers here are escalating these situations by always having their weapon drawn. And so, I think it's interesting what Bill de Blasio said, the mayor of New York. He talks about...
He made a great speech.
He did. He made, it was refreshing to hear a politician talk the way he did, because so few of them are even willing to acknowledge that race is the major factor that's going on here. And he did that. And he also announced that they're going to retrain the entire New York Police Department, which has 35,000 police officers.
Wow.
But I think it's interesting because, I'm not sure it's the lack of training or bad training that's causing them to act this way. I can't imagine that they're trained to just pull up to a 12-year-old boy and shoot him in the head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's so much the training or if it's the culture in these police departments, but I just think it's interesting looking at how to move forward. They haven't announced anything about who's going to retrain the officers, what kind of new training they're going to receive. There's no details yet, and so I think that's something that we have to look at.
Well, I think what we were talking when we were talking about Rudy Giuliani, and one of the things that he said that was really interesting, he was listing cities that could, so easily be the next Ferguson.
Oh yes, I did hear that. Yeah,
and Gary was at the top of that list, and Dad's right, for nobody to be putting together a protest. I mean, we haven't even heard from our elected officials. Like, where are they in this?
Right, and we haven't heard from any elected officials, and it's really interesting that I wanted to bring up the point about the lack of leadership. We haven't heard from celebrities on this issue. The only ones that have shown any support for it are the St. Louis Rams.
Well, Rachel, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about those teams. You're listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. Please stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. Today's show is pre-recorded. No phone calls, please.
I'm Chartreuse Watkins Bailey, former master cosmetologist and founder of Stella Shampoos and Conditioners. Ladies, are you experiencing dry scalp, breakage, and hair that's hard to manage, shedding, or looking dull? Is your hair dry, brittle, and tangled? Stella Shampoos and Conditioners is the product for you. Created in partnership with a medical doctor and chemist, this product will strengthen and keep your hair looking good. Stella complements all types of styling aids by keeping your hair healthy and hydrated. Available online at StellaShampoo.com.
Big Daddy's Barbecue, 4213 Cleveland Street in Gary, Indiana, is the place to be when you want some seriously delicious barbecue. If you hadn't heard, Big Daddy's Barbecue was the 2010 Best Barbecue Hoodie Award winner, the 2011 American Express Open and Facebook Big Break Contest winner, and no wonder, with savory ribs, baby backs, rib tips, hot links, jerk and barbecue chicken, turkey tips and links, beef and pork sandwiches, along with serious sides like okra, macaroni and cheese, and collard greens. Top off your meal with mouth-watering peach cobbler, banana pudding, and much, much more. Family gathering or special event? Big Daddy's caters, bringing that award-winning taste straight to you. Big Daddy's Barbecue, 4231 Cleveland and Gary, with a new location in Hammond. Open 7 days a week, so call or drop by today. 219-888-9592. 219-888-9592. Online at BigDaddy'sBarbecue.com. The award-winning Big Daddy's Barbecue.
Hey, everybody, it's Val Warner from Windy City Live, and you're listening to my girls Reagan, Rochelle, and Renee from the Hatcher Empowerment Factor.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
We're back on the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. I got a text during our break that there has been a protest march at Purdue University Calumet by the Black Student Union over there. And also there is a unarmed police shooting of somebody right here from our area. I don't know how many of you all remember Lasana. He was around a lot, especially dealing in the council and speaking at the school board. But in Kentucky, his son was shot in the back by a white police officer. And they are finally doing an investigation into that. So,
yes, and I'm really happy to hear that students over at Purdue Calumet have been out protesting and marching,
Yeah.
and I certainly commend them and congratulate them for that. My hope is that other universities in this area and that just citizens, as we are seeing in cities all over the country, citizens will see that what happened to Eric Gardner, what happened to Michael Brown, those are things that affect everyone, not just people in New York, not just people in Missouri. Yeah. So hopefully everyone will come out. And I really I think it's important to think about Rudy Giuliani, because he basically said, as you indicated, that Gary could be the next Ferguson, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And why did he say that? Because the fact is we have a population here in the city of Gary that is more than 85% African American, yes, more than 85% black. Our police department is at least 60% white.
Yes.
And it's not just the race of the officer that I think is really important here. One of the things that exists here in Gary and across the country, in cities across the country, is that police officers no longer live in the community that they patrol. Mm-hmm. And so as a consequence, the relationship between police officers and that community are always strained because the police officer goes home at night to a suburban community.
So, Dad, I think what you're saying is that it's not necessarily white and black officers. It can be black officers who have the same mindset as these white officers that we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, and they have nothing invested in the communities that they're patrolling. And I think that's, a big part of the problem also is that, they just come in. Most people care about where they live. Even though these are officers, they don't
Rachel,
care about other communities the way you care about your own. So
you were going to say about the teams that have been protesting kind of silently, but protesting. And let's talk about that a little, then we'll take a few calls here.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I think, I just wanted to point out that when I was a teenager in the 90s and in the early 2000s, I always felt like, why aren't people on the streets? Because these things have been happening constantly, I think it does seem like killings by police officers are happening more often lately, but even back then, bad things were happening, and I think that, we were kind of complacent. People had been through the civil rights movement. I think people were, you get tired after struggling that hard, and people were just kind of complacent, and so I'm so glad that people are out in the streets again, and they're really making noise and trying to shut things down to make the point. And I just hope that continues, that we realize, no matter how much progress you make, you have to always keep fighting for your rights. You can't stop. You can't just say, oh, the last generation did that for us and it's done now, so we don't have to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to stay diligent about making sure that our communities are protected. And I was talking a little bit about the lack of leadership in terms of our celebrities who are out there, people who have more access to getting their voices heard.
Yeah.
I think we could use more of that. And so far, all I've seen is what the St. Louis Rams did, which I think was great. And, it's outrageous that anyone could criticize that. But also, this morning, there's a basketball player yesterday.
Derrick Rose?
Derrick Rose,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Derrick Rose wore the shirt that said, "I can't breathe." I mean, we need more people like that to also speak up about what's going on, because they're more likely to be listened to.
Yeah, well, and I think he did it very silently, but it made a really big impact. And
Right, it makes a point.
yeah, for all
and
us
we're all in
Bulls
this
fans.
together.
Right. So why don't we take some of these calls? I know we'll probably have a lot this morning. Let's get started. Caller, you're on the air. Please give us your question or comment.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good morning.
Hi.
How you doing, Mayor Hatcher?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Your family, my family, and the kids, great-grandkids, kids, they actually witnessed a murder on television.
Yeah.
What happened in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get no plainer than that. And the mindset. See, as you watch these cop shows, you see the same tactics, putting their knee in the side of a face, have it pinned to the pavement. And I think it has desensitized people. They done seen it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And it has more effect on desensitizing white America, because black people felt that.
Yeah.
And if you sit back and look at it, they took a black man and had him lose millions of dollars and put him in jail for some dogs. And right after that, then these murders start. And they walk away, no indictments, no nothing. They just walk away like a black man's life don't mean nothing.
Yeah. And I think, thank you, caller, for the call. I think
Sure.
he makes a good point about these cop shows. Cops and, there's so many reality shows now, and it shows often, white officers, going into poor neighborhoods, and it kind of gives the officer's perspective of what they're walking into. Do you think that's desensitizing the people who are watching these shows?
Well, I certainly think that it has an impact. Everyone knows the power of television, and so it certainly has an impact. I really appreciate the caller's point also about not just the fact that this incident occurred with Eric Gardner in New York, but that he was subsequently found to not be at fault by the grand jury.
Yeah.
And I don't know how some of your listeners may feel or may have felt about this, but when that decision was announced, it was as if someone had hit me in the gut. Just had the pain of knowing that this man was in fact killed, And the caller again is certainly right about it was literally murder in front of your face.
Yeah.
And the fact that had happened, and then to be found faultless, to be found, he was just doing his job.
Yeah.
That is incredible. And if that is true, if what that officer did was just his job, then we are really in trouble.
We're in trouble, yes.
Absolutely.
Well, Dad, let's go to another call. We have some people holding here. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning to the lovely ladies of law.
Good morning.
And good morning to their honorable father,
Good morning.
Mayor Hatcher. This is Kendra Johnson. And, you know, what gets me in all of this, I had a conversation with some mothers from the Boys Academy the other day. And all of us have sons. I have 4 sons, 2 daughters, and 5 grandsons. And it concerns us because even though we live in Gary, that does not mean that somebody does not have the mentality to say, well, I'm in fear of my life. I believe the stereotypes that have been put out there about our young men and our culture. So all I have to do is say I was in fear of my life, or I thought he had a gun, or anything along that lines. But if it was a civilian that had this mode of thinking, we'd be arrested for murder. There was an incident about 2 summers ago where a Caucasian coworker of mine was dropping me off in Dory Miller. He was immediately pulled over by a Caucasian state trooper, and the residents, because it was summertime and the windows were open, they could hear what this officer was saying. And he told him, he said, I know the people that live out here. You ain't one of them. What you doing out here? You came out here? I wouldn't come out here unless I had 3 or 4 guns. You know, and he talked to that man in such a demeaning manner and attitude, and he had just dropped me off. And I said, officer, is there a problem? He went to blessing and cussing me out.
Wow.
You know, and I put him on, you know, I didn't get his name, but I called the radio stations because I wanted it to be put out there. Racial profiling does not just have to be a Caucasian police officer stopping a black person. It could be a Caucasian officer stopping a Caucasian person who has decided they want to work with our community.
Yeah.
And lastly, with the Mr. Lasana's son, his name is Senku Diaspora, and he was shot by a black police officer.
Wow.
And I've been Googling the case because after what happened to me years ago, 18 years ago this month. Matter of fact, this week, I had a seizure at the Lake County Department of Children and Family Services, and I was left on the floor for 2.5 hours in front of my 5-year-old child.
Wow.
They never called an ambulance. They never did an incident or accident report. And after I was able to mentally recover from that, I became interested in law, civil rights, and, you know, this. And that's why we need to educate our people, because I don't want to see another family go through what we're seeing now, and we can't let this die. We can't let this stop. We can't give up on this like we gave up on Occupy Wall Street, because if we do give up on it, we're going to find ourselves right back in the situation of Jim Crow and segregation. You all
Well, thank you so much for your call. Dad, were you going to say something?
I would only say that we need more citizens like Ms. Johnson.
Yes, yes.
Because she is active and she's involved and she gets out. She goes to school board meetings.
Yes.
She goes to every meeting possible. So we need more citizens like her.
Well, thanks, Dad. Yeah, that's a good point. We have a couple more callers. Let's try to get through these callers, and then we'll get back to the discussion. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, the most powerful radio station in America.
Good morning, Mr. Matlock.
Empowerment.
Yes, how are you this morning?
Doing great. Look like we got a tree shaker there this morning. I talk about tree shaking jelly makers, as Mayor had to know. And
yes.
I am ready. I was sick when I heard about the situation when the man hollered, I couldn't breathe. I can't breathe. And I'm just simply saying that before I leave town in another week or so, for for a little vacation. I'm ready, as I indicated to you, Mayor Hatcher, to take to the streets. And I think right now it started today when I heard Mayor Hatcher on the radio. I said, well, maybe this thing's going to start here locally today.
Well, we need to start today. I mean, I can't believe, Mr. Malek, you know these elected officials in our city. Why don't you think they've come out and done anything yet?
Mayor Hatcher.
Yes.
What did I tell you? When anything starts, it always started when we talked about the bus situation when I went to Indianapolis when they take the license bureau. It always starts with community act. Miss Johnson is one of them.
Yes.
Markel Watson is one of them.
Yes, he is.
It's going to start with those people. Very seldom, if you level, what happened with Martin Luther King? It wasn't the politicians that were Rosa Parks. And if it's to start in Gary, Indiana, it's going to start with community activists.
But Mr. Malek, doesn't it seem? Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. Doesn't it seem like? Back then we didn't have so many black elected officials, but we live in a city where all our elected officials are black. They all know the issues. They all have sons and daughters who either know somebody who has been killed or know somebody who has had a run-in with the police. They should understand what's going on here. And yes, it's always going to be community activists out there who do a great job and really work. But we need
you remember
them.
what I told you? You remember what I told you about when we were on the wall of separation between Hammond, when the cameras left, the politician left. You remember I told you that?
Right.
Go ahead,
Well,
Shelly.
I think, being a leader means more than getting elected. And the best leaders come from the ground up. They come from being in the streets, and they're the people that are out organizing and who are really passionate about these issues. And unfortunately, those aren't always the people that are elected.
I heard Mayor Reed in this morning. I was looking at television. Mayor Reed in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have not heard very many mayors, elected officials around the country saying we're going to take the lead.
Right.
I hear Mayor Hatcher say, "Let's get started. Let's do it."
Right.
So until like I say. I look forward to, if anything is going to happen in America, it's going to be in most cities. In Chicago, did the mayor of Chicago start? He may have come there when they got it started, but I think that mostly it was community activists, people who were sick and tired of being sick and tired. But with that, I'm going to let you guys go.
All right, thank you for calling.
Thank you.
Let me just make this quick comment, and that is, yesterday, I spent most of yesterday on the phone calling people around the city and asking them, where do we go from here? What do we do?
What's next?
And I was pleased with the response, the positive response that so many people gave. They felt that there was time to take some action, to do something. I received calls the last 2 days from all over the country, and people were saying, we need to do something. We can't just stand by silently while this goes on. And so I make the point because some people will remember that in 1972, there was a huge political convention here in Gary, Indiana. And out of that convention came the move nationally for African Americans to run for public office. Up to that point, they have been marching and demonstrating. Dr. King had done such an incredible job. But the spirit shifted from the streets to electing people to public office. And at that time, there were only about 300 black elected officials in the whole country. And but today, there's well over 10,000. And many people credit that meeting in Gary with being the spur to increasing those numbers by the thousands. So I mentioned that to say it seems to me that many people are coming to the conclusion that it is time to take some action, to do something. And hopefully people will think in terms of what that should be and will, in fact, take that action.
Okay, well, we're going to take these other two calls before we take a commercial break. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Hatcher.
Good morning.
I just wanted to call in. It seems like there's an attitude, even with our president being in office, that people can just hurl all types of insulting comments, say inappropriate things, and it's like just an attitude that's hovering around the country where people can, racism has been around for forever. At times it was hidden and then not so hidden, but It seems like today people can do anything and it's okay. It's okay to do whatever you want. They have, like the guy said earlier, a murder that was, on tape that everybody has seen. And I feel that, I don't know who's going to be attacked next. People can just do anything to people of color and anything's not done about it. And I'm just wondering, where did this attitude that people can just go out and do things to people and not have any consequences, where did that all start? Where did it come from?
Well, thank you, caller, for that question. And I think Rachel made a good point about that. After the 60s happened and all this marching and all that, it kind of died down for a while. Mm-hmm. And it seems like during this period of die down, the attitude started to come back.
Well, and I think, things were getting better, for a time, and people were pleased with the direction that things were going, but all the while, there were all these other things being done to us that were kind of behind the scenes and that now we're really starting to talk about, like the drug war and, the
more
huge gap in wealth.
Racism.
Yeah, institutional things that have put black communities in a horrible position today. And, I think one of the themes that I'm hearing from all the callers and something we talked about last week is the idea that this is more about the criminalization of black bodies than it is about, whether it's a white cop, a black cop, whoever. It's about looking at a black person and having no value for their life. And any of us can have that attitude, regardless of what your race is. And, I think part of what demonstrates that is the fact that out of the Michael Brown case and out of the Eric Garner case, there were charges brought against the man who video recorded the Eric Gardner incident. He's being prosecuted.
He's being indicted.
And now they're talking about possibly charging Michael Brown's stepfather for inciting a riot. And the fact that they are seriously discussing that is just shows you how we never get any benefit of the doubt. We can't do anything wrong. And these white officers are able to get away with all these horrible things, and we get charged for any little thing they can find on us. And so I think part of this whole situation that people need to remember is how much power prosecutors have.
Yeah.
That's what this shows me, is they have so much power.
That's absolutely right.
They totally control these indictments. Whatever evidence they want to present, they can, and they can get whatever outcome they want.
Well, Rachel, I think that's a great point. We have one more call, and then let's go to another break. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, ladies, attorneys.
Good morning.
And Mayor Hatcher. It's Reverend Jackson. How y'all doing?
Oh, good morning, Reverend Jackson.
Good. I just want to make one brief point and then make a kind of an announcement. We can't forget, I know we're talking about elected officials. I do some work with the Drug Policy Alliance. And one of the things that has become clear in all the major cities all over the country, that unfortunately elected officials, city council persons, mayors have been complicit in the over-policing of our community.
Yes, I agree.
Instead of pouring money into community policing, getting officers out of the cars, and I'm a former police officer, I know how this works. Instead of getting police officers out of the cars and involved in the community, they have sought to get task force and come in and over-police, which means, as Mayor Hatcher pointed out, you get an inordinate amount of people who don't live in the community, and all they want is to have action. And that is the result. So many of our elected officials are complicit because they've hollered law and order, arrest, lock them up for minor offenses. And the other point is we've got to be able to see that Eric Frayne, the accused cop killer, could be arrested without incident. Cliven Bundy, illegal white cattle rancher, can have an armed standoff with federal police, and they back down. But Eric Garner, Mike Brown, and so on are dead. Finally, the announcement is we are at our church at 1:45 today having a strategy meeting on how we here in Gary can get involved to show our support for the protests that are going on. So at 1:45, anybody in the community who wants to come by and talk about how we can strategize about how we get involved and show our support. 1:45 today, 1276 West 20th Avenue, Trinity United Church of Christ.
Well, thank you so much, and we're so lucky to have you in our community, Reverend.
I appreciate it.
You know, you've just been a godsend, literally, you know, to the community of Gary. So thank you so much, and please, whoever's listening, please support that meeting at 1:45 today at Trinity United Church of Christ.
Absolutely, and again, I want to say thank you to Reverend Jackson for all that he has done and is doing, and I don't know if he got the message, but Reverend Jackson, you were one of the people that I called yesterday because I knew that if anyone was doing anything, I knew you would be involved in it. And so I hope everyone will come out to that meeting at 1:45 and discuss ways in which our community can support the communities all across this country that are protesting Eric Garner's death, but also the long string of deaths that we have seen from Michael Brown to Trayvon Martin, and really what happened to so many African Americans that we are not reading about or seeing on television.
Well, thank you again, Reverend Jackson. So let's go to our break, and then we'll come back. We have a few minutes to wrap up. You're listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor.
Thank you for listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. Today's show is pre-recorded. No phone calls, please. Don't touch that dial. This is the hottest radio show on the airwaves, the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. We'll be back in a moment.
I'm Chartrice Watkins Bailey, former master cosmetologist and founder of Stella Shampoos and Conditioners. Ladies, are you experiencing dry scalp, breakage, and hair that's hard to manage, shedding, or looking dull? Is your hair dry, brittle, and tangled? Stella Shampoos and Conditioners is the product for you. Created in partnership with a medical doctor and chemist, this product will strengthen and keep your hair looking good. Stella complements all types of styling aids by keeping your hair healthy and hydrated. Available online at StellaShampoo.com.
This is Shelby Moore, and you're listening to the Sisters of Law. Reagan, Rachel, Renee, it's the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. WLTH, 1370 AM.
From Chicago to Northwest Indiana, I have literally tried everybody's barbecue. And guess what? That's right, y'all failed. And somebody told me about Big Daddy's barbecue. And all I got to say is, where have you been all my life, Big Daddy's barbecue? We talking tender, juicy, savory rib tip, baby back ribs. They got hot, oh my goodness, they got everything. Jerk chicken, turkey tip, pork and beef sandwiches, sides like collard greens, macaroni cheese. Oh, and they got peach cobbler banana pudding and that barbecue sauce. Woohoo! And Big Daddy's Barbecue has two locations, 4213 Cleveland Street in Gary, Indiana, and 6823 Grand Avenue in Hammond. And you know they cater. Just call 219-888-9592. That's 219-888-9592. And you know Big Daddy's Barbecue won the Steve Harvey's 2010 and 2013 Best Barbecue Hoodie Award. Yes! Follow Big Daddy's Barbecue on Facebook and Twitter. I got one last thing to say about Big Daddy's Barbecue, and that is, that's it. Ain't nothing else to say.
Hello, it's Dr. Gerard McClendon. Want the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Tune in, Reagan, Rachel, and Renee, the Sisters of Law, on the Hatcher Empowerment Factor.
Attention, ladies. It's time to unlock your hair's potential for silky smoothness and luminous shine. It's time for Stella Shampoos and Conditioners. The Stella Weightless Conditioning Treatment System will strengthen your hair from the root to the ends. Stella Shampoo is a clarifying shampoo removing all residue, weave glue, and leaves your hair clean yet soft with a natural shine. The Stella Conditioner is a deep moisturizer and works to repair brittle or damaged hair from chemical use. Stella Conditioner also strengthens with keratin proteins to prevent hair loss. The Stella Oil-Free Sheen is our signature product that gives the hair amazing luster and shine. It contains no oils, so your hair is not weighted down. Healthy hair with a radiant shine. That's the Stella Weightless Conditioning Treatment System. Order online at StellaShampoosAndConditioners.com. That's StellaShampoosAndConditioners.com.
And we're back on the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. We are coming back a little quick on this break because we have 2 calls holding, and I'm sorry for anybody else who wanted to call in for today, but we're going to have to cut it off with these last 2 callers, and then we're going to do a wrap-up. So, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, I didn't know if I was going next to. Hey, good morning, everyone. Especially
good morning.
All of y'all, especially Mayor Hatcher. It's good to hear you on with your daughters, man. Beautiful job you're doing with them, and, man, glad to have them on the air.
Thank you.
A couple things. We're going to have a memorial service for St. Q just for on next Saturday at 3:30 at Pastor Jackson's Church on Trinity. So hopefully people will come to that and express our support for his family after a policeman shot his son in the back, 20-year-old St. Q, about a month ago in Jackson, Tennessee.
Wow.
But my question, too, though, is about all these police forces that have been allowed to come into this community and do these sweeps. Pastor Jackson kind of touched on it. But that is the sort of thing that we need to demand that they stop immediately. They want to come out here and have fun and arrest a lot of people. They're quoted in the papers saying things like that. And the city, I think, also has been dumbed down so much. That's why I think a lot of the activism or a lot of the fury or resistance is not there. When you celebrate July 4th as your Independence Day in a manner which we do for so many years, those are the sort of things that dumb us down. But I'll hang up and listen again. Pleasure to hear you all.
Thank you so much for calling in. And of course, that's Kwabena. He was working with not only the Purdue Calumet Black Student Union, but also the Indiana University Black Student Union. I saw him out there the other night, working to kind of organize those student unions with these protests. So we thank him for his work in the city of Gary. We have one more caller. Caller,
Yes.
you're on the air.
Yeah, God bless you this morning. How you doing?
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
I, too, am glad to see and to hear you guys on the air. Mayor Hatcher, I'm going to say this here. We are blessed by God. I'm going to turn my television down because I don't want it to be interfered. We are blessed by God to still have you around.
Thank you.
You know, the one thing I think as a race that we as a people have forgotten is that we stood on the backs of people that really went through some things to get where they are or where we are today. And it seems like we fumbled the ball. You know, 2 weeks ago I brought up about Miss Tillman on the air because 50 years ago, when they threatened her life and what all they were going to do to her, and if she showed her son's body, she told them they had already killed her as far as life was concerned. But she was going to live through him, and she did, because she showed the world what was going on even before then, what was going on and yet to come now, you know. And I was just listening to George Stephanopoulos and them. The whole South now is a Republican. And we brought back so many of that slave mentality ways, you know. And our people have got to look at themselves in a whole different manner in which they're doing. Yeah. That pride that they once had, they need to get it again. And we need to teach it to our children. We allow a lot of, and I don't have anything against people making money the right way, but we allow our children to produce records that degraded ourselves and our women, our people as a whole, and it got all out of hand. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's like we took whatever little dignity that our parents had suffered, fought, and walked, marched, and died for, and we just gave it back, you know. And I'm just happy to see, you know, it's amazing because you have all daughters, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes down to dignity. I think you did a great job. Everybody's going to have some ups and some downs, God never said things was going to be perfect, but I will say this here. You stood for the cause back then. Regardless if you made some mistakes, we all do, you still stand for the cause now. And that's what's important.
All right. Well, thank you very much, caller.
You're welcome.
With that last call, Rachel, I think you had some final thoughts. We only have a few minutes, and I wanted to give Dad a chance to wrap it up here at the end for us.
Yeah, me too. And, you know, there's so much I want to say because, you know, we could talk about this forever, but I really think that all the reforms that people are talking about with the cameras and everything, it's all good, and the retraining of officers, but nothing's going to change until these officers face real consequences. And we'll see what comes out of the federal civil rights investigations that are going on. But, you know, I really hope we also push for independent special prosecutors to prosecute these cases where there's police misconduct involved, because there has to be consequences, or else this is going to keep happening.
Yeah, I agree. And what about you, Dad? We have about 5 minutes left. Can you give us a kind of ending thought here for the listening audience?
Well, first, let me say that I appreciate so very much being invited to be on the show today. And, it's wonderful, and it's a wonderful show. And I'm very proud. Any parent would say this, I'm sure, but I really am very proud of my daughters and what they are doing. And let's remember that there were many fighters in Gary. I remember everyone from the Jeanette and Curtis Strong to Lawrence Anderson, Reverend John Anderson, John Hunter, Reverend John Hunter. They were out and taking the initiative in terms of civil rights here in the city of Gary. I'm sure that with young people like the three of you coming along, and there are so many others in our city today, I'm sure that we have the people who can stand up and carry on that battle, carry on that fight, because as the caller said, everything's not perfect. We certainly have not reached the promised land yet right here in our own community. So I'm hopeful that as a consequence of the actions of so many that are here in Gary and that are available, and with some leadership, I really believe that struggle, that battle, will continue, and I'm hopeful that it will. Across the country, there's no doubt. We're seeing what's happening across the country, and one of the things and I'll close with this, I hope everyone listening has the opportunity to hear the eulogy that Reverend Jesse Jackson gave yesterday for Mayor Marion Barry of Washington, D.C. He was laid to rest yesterday, and Reverend Jackson, in his eulogy, gave a history lesson regarding civil rights and the people that have been involved in that struggle over the years and continue to be involved today. So hopefully C-SPAN will repeat that, will play it again, and there will be an opportunity for everyone to hear it. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you. And go ahead, Joe.
And everyone, don't forget about the meeting at Trinity United today at 1:45 p.m. And also, if you're in the Chicago area, there's going to be many protests today. There's one scheduled at 4 p.m. at State and Jackson downtown. And
you'll be there?
I'll be at that one. That one's hosted by a group called We Charge Genocide, who is a group of young people who went to the United Nations to report on the police killings of blacks in the United States. And they have an event on December 11th at Roosevelt University where they're going to be reporting back about when they went to the United Nations. So if you want to get out in the streets today, there's plenty of opportunity for that. So please do.
Well, great. And with that, we're going to close. Thank you for listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor. Please tune in next week, Sunday morning at 10 a.m.
Thanks for listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor with Sisters of Law, Reagan, Rachelle, and Renee Hatcher. The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station. The Hatcher Empowerment Factor was brought to you by Markel Watkins Productions. For booking and personal appearances, call 219-791-3513. And thanks again for listening to the Hatcher Empowerment Factor.